Good day to each and everyone. I am Salpina Vilpiasa. Today we tackle about reflections and limitations. We start in perspective of the author. First, insiders' viewpoints. As a Spanish colonial official, Morga's account reflects first-hand experience, offering valuable details about policy implementation and colonial strategies. Second, cultural lens. Despite his observation skills, Morga's narratives are inevitably shaped by his European perspective, which occasionally biases his interpretations of indigenous practices. At, as we've known before that the treatment of the Spanish and indigenous are biased. And this is the interpretation of the author or the perspective. In, it's all about the biases of indigenous because indigenous before they look down the indigenous people because they see that indigenous people is the poor people. Third is multi-facet. Third is multi-faceted role. Morga's position of influence allowed him unique access to official documents and interactions with different societal groups, enriching his description but also trying them to colonial ideas. This slide is titled Perspective of the Author and focuses on Antonio de Morga. Highlights three aspects inside viewpoints, cultural lens, and multifaceted role. This slide explains how Morga's experience as a Spanish colonial official provided first-hand details about policy implementation and colonial strategies. However, it also notes that his European perspective inevitably shaped his interpretation of indigenous practices. Additionally, his position of influence allowed him unique access to official documents and instructions. An example of Morga's insider perspective would be his detailed descriptions of the Spanish colonial administration workings. His cultural lens might be evident in how he portrays indigenous religious practices. Possibly with a European bias, his multifaceted role is illustrated by his ability to access colonial and indigenous viewpoints. Now we proceed to the second slide, which all about nuance portrayal of society. Acknowledging class dynamic, recognize the interplay between different social strata rather and their roles in historical developments. Second, highlighting indigenous perspectives captures local traditions, customs, and practices with historical accounts. And third, addressing European influences, analyze effects of Spanish colonialism on societal structure and cultural shifts. This title, which all about the Noah's portrayal society and discuss acknowledge class dynamics, highlighting indigenous perspectives and addressing European influence. This slide explains the Morga's works recognize the interplay between different social strata and their roles in historical development. It captures local traditions, customs, and practices Within historical account of analyze the effects of Spanish colonialism on societal structure and cultural shifts. Acknowledging class dynamic is shown by Morgas' description of the roles of different social classes in the colonial Philippines. Highlighting indigenous perspectives can be seen in his documentation local customs and traditions. Addressing European influence is exemplified by his analysis on how Spanish colonialization changed Philippines. And the last slide is modern interpretations. First foundational resource, Morga's work remains significant reference in Philippine historiography, providing an early written record of island, pre-Hispanic, and colonial history. Second is critics of bias. Contemporary historians critically analyze his focus on Spanish achievements and questions the omission or oversimplification of indigenous resilience and success. Third, interdisciplinary interest. The book helps modern scholars explore connections between political, economic, and social dynamic of Spanish colonialism, enriching debates on identity and nationalhood in the Philippines. In the last slide explains the Morgas work is a significant reference in Philippines historiography, providing an early written record of the islands. Pre-Hispanic and colonial history, contemporary historians critically analyze his focus on Spanish achievements and question omission or oversimplifications of indigenous resilience of success. The book helps modern scholars explore connects between political, economic, and social dynamic of Spanish colonialism, enriching debates on identity and nationalhood in the Philippines. Morga's work is a foundational resource because it provides detailed account of early Philippine society. Critics of bias can be seen in modern analysis that question his portrayal of Spanish colonialization as purely beneficial. The interdisciplinary interest shown by scholars using the work to understand the long-term impact of colonialism in Philippines identity. And lastly, what I've said that this slide help modern scholar explores connections between political Spanish colonialism. And that could be all. Thank you and God bless.